Where's he at, Auburn?
Hello again, and welcome to the SEC Daily. He's with the SEC Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee, joined by Gabe DeArmond of PowerMizzou.com. I think I hit the start button on Gabe a little prematurely, but in any case, we're recovered. We're here. Looking forward to talking some Missouri Football Day with the guy that knows it better than anybody. We got a ton of Missouri people in the chat already. I don't know if you can you see that? Where you are?
I cannot. I can see
Okay.
it now. I hit the right
Okay.
button. Yeah.
Good deal. Well, yes, that there are plenty of Missouri fans here. They've been hanging out for a couple of weeks and enjoying the ride that is now Missouri football. I want to get to that, but just a second. As a reminder, always looking for sponsors. Caroline.smith at southeastern14.com if you're interested. But yeah, Gabe, what a ride. Did you see coming into this season us being at a place where Missouri had one loss at this juncture?
I didn't think it was impossible. I wouldn't have predicted it. Certainly, I think I picked Missouri 7-5. Now, when I do my predictions, I always I prefer to under promise and over deliver because if I pick Missouri to lose a game and they win, nobody's mad at me because they're happy
Right.
Missouri won. But if I pick Missouri to win a game and they lose, then they're mad Missouri lost, and then they're also mad at me for getting their hopes up, right? So I tend to maybe if I think they're an 8-5, I pick 7-5 with a better shot at 8 wins than 6. I think the first 7 has been best case scenario. Like the best case scenario was beating Kansas State, playing LSU tough and losing, and then winning at Kentucky. That's what happened. They have fulfilled what I think. Now the part I didn't see coming was that they're really a bad snap penalty away from being 7-0 and probably a top 10 team right now. And there will come a time where, if certain things break certain ways over the last 5 weeks, that Missouri fans probably look back at that and with a lot more grief than they do right now. There are situations where that could become really costly, but I think right now they're not there yet. They're just happy to be on this ride.
You wrote something this weekend that I really thought summed up Missouri well, and I don't have it in front of me, so this is from memory. I think you talked about the intangibles being a big thing with this team, and I would agree because, like, you look at computers right now, the ones that I really like, the mainstream ones that everybody knows about. Missouri's 30ish in the country, so a good team, but not a great team, and based a lot of those are based on scoring margins and things like that. I get that, but this team has something that most of the SEC doesn't have. Like you don't look at Missouri and just say, hey, there's a glaring hole here or a glaring hole there. Now they might have the best quarterback in the conference, or the best running back, or the best defensive lineman or cornerback. You could argue they've got the best receiver. It's a difficult discussion this year and one that's interesting. But when I watch them play, I just don't see a lot of gaping holes that other teams had. I don't know if that's connecting the dots on your intangibles. Part of intangibles also is probably having a quarterback who's been around and played a ton of games in this league, which is also helping. But I don't know if that's a question as much as it is a comment or a topic for discussion. But I found the way that you wrote that up interesting.
This is the best roster he's had here. There's no question. It has the most talent at the most different places. They have a lot of options. I mean, they won at Kentucky and Luther Burden did virtually nothing. He had 3 touches for 21 yards. So they've got some different ways. Cody Schrader isn't going to wow anybody, but once a game, like we get to halftime of most games and Missouri fans are going, really? There's not a better running back than this? And then at some point in the second half, he busts one big run that changes the game. Almost every week. He did it last week with a 21-yard touchdown against Kentucky. So I think it's the most complete team he's had by far. I would agree with you. They have one of the 2 best receivers in the SEC and the country. I don't know if he's better than Malik Neighbors or not. I think they might have the best cornerback in the SEC in Chris Abrams-Drain. I think their duo is maybe the best in the SEC. The rest is, Missouri probably would rank between like 3rd and 8th at most places in the SEC, but I don't think they'd rank 12th or 14th anywhere, which is very helpful, except maybe tight end. And they appear to have finally made the move to start Brett Northley, a true freshman. He had 4 targets, 4 catches for 40 yards last week. I mean, Missouri fans got used to Chase Kaufman and Martin Rucker and Michael Agnew and this, hey, we're going to have a Mackey semifinalist every year.
Alberto,
you don't have to have
Alberto.
That. Yeah, and Alberto. You don't have to have that. You have to have a guy that can go 6 yards and catch a football at tight end.
Yeah.
And they appear now to have that for the first time in a few years.
Yeah, there's only one school in the league that's got an absolute stud tight end, and now it's not going to happen for 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So, see if I remember, this has been about a decade now. I remember you and I sitting at Loveless Cafe in Nashville.
Oh, I love that place.
Oh, it's great, isn't it? We were about to cover Missouri Vandy the next day. And I remember we're just kind of sitting around trying to figure out what was going to happen. And I think Missouri was 4-0, but hadn't beaten anybody at that point. And we were just kind of throwing up our hands. We're going, we're not really sure what we're watching here, but we're interested to find out. Missouri blew Vanderbilt off the field the next day. And that's when Vanderbilt was pretty good, too, under James Franklin, and ended up winning one of 2 back-to-back East championships. Compare this team to that one. Is this team better? Is this team worse? What do you think?
I think it's not as good as the 2013 team was. That was Missouri's team that lost in overtime to South Carolina and won every other game that year, went and played Auburn in the SEC title game, and still one of the best football games I've ever seen. I mean, Trey Mason had, I forget the exact number, but I think it was 1,117 yards rushing in that game. And Auburn went to the national title game. But Missouri was tied at the end of 3 quarters. You know, that was a really good game. The 2014 team, I think this one compares a lot to that one. That team lost to Indiana in week 3 or 4. And everybody said, well, this season's not going to be any good, right? And then they came back and they won the East. And like, it didn't seem like a great team, but they had a couple things go their way and they just kept winning games. So I'm not predicting necessarily that Missouri wins the East this year. I think that team finished 10-2 in the regular season, then lost to Alabama in the title game. But it's that 2014 team that won the division was not a juggernaut. It was not as good as the 13 team or the 2007 Missouri team that nearly played for a title. So I think this team is kind of similar to that, or maybe a 2010 Missouri team that didn't win its division but finished 10-2, beat number 1 Oklahoma, but lost a couple other ones along the way. I think it's a good team, maybe not a great team.
Yeah, that 13 team, I think, was the one that had the really elite defense, and 14 was more just maybe somebody had to win the East.
Yeah, and 13, had Dorial Green Beckham was on that team, Henry Josie was on that team, and they still had the defense in 14, but James Franklin was gone. They had half the defense, right? In 2013, they had Michael Sam and Coney Ely started at defensive end, and those guys went pro, and everybody said, well, Missouri's defense is in trouble. And those of us who watch the team every day said, oh, what you don't know is Missouri just got better at defensive end because they have Marcus Golden and Shane Ray, right? And they actually did get better at defensive end. But Matty Mock had taken over for James Franklin. Josie was gone. DGB was in trouble. And so that team wasn't as good, but still managed to get it done.
Brady Cook, I want to talk about him. I think he's, again, I don't know that he's the MVP of the league so far. And he's not. But if you're having if you fill out a ballot and got 10 votes, he's probably worth one of those somewhere. It feels like the guy that we saw the first 5.5, 6.5 games, wherever the halftime of the LSU mark was, and the guy we've seen since has been a little different. Maybe he's come back down to earth a little bit, but he's been awfully good.
Yeah, and I don't just say this Missouri-wise. I can't remember a guy that has flipped the script like Brady Cook has. 2 games in, Missouri fans wanted the kid benched. They have been screaming for Sam Horn for a year. And look, I understood it. Brady had been average to below average. And then all of a sudden, he had never thrown for 300 yards. And then he threw for 304 straight games, including 411 against LSU, and just was lights out. He was suddenly the reason they were winning games. Now, the Kentucky game, he only threw for 167, but Kentucky clearly came in and said, Luther Burden's not beating us, and you're not beating us with big plays. You're going to have to do this a few yards at a time. And I think it's a credit to Missouri. They did that. If I had a vote right now, I would say Brady Cook is your second team All SEC quarterback behind Jaden Daniels. I
Yeah.
think Daniels is running away with it and has no competition, and Missouri saw that firsthand. But second team is, it's Brady Cook or it's Jackson Dart at this point, I think. I mean, I could honestly make an argument for Spencer Rattler because he is South Carolina's entire team, but he
No
won't
help.
get those votes.
Yeah. Enos Rakestraw was out last week, correct?
Yes.
What's the prognosis for getting him back?
Drinkwitz said he had a groin injury. It's one of those things where, like, it has to be completely healthy because if you keep bringing him back, it's just going to get tweaked and he's going to like play a game and then not play a game.
Yeah.
My guess, we'll talk to Drink in about an hour here. My guess is they sit him one more week. They have a bye next week. You give him 3 weeks off. He's healthy when you go to Georgia. Then it's Tennessee, Florida, Arkansas to finish the season. And look, I think they probably think they can go ahead and beat South Carolina without him, to be honest.
They got a lot of stars on this defense. You mentioned Chris Abrams-Drain, that they got Tyron Hopper. I know the performance has been a little bit uneven. They got Darius Robinson, who's been pretty good when he's been healthy, which has been an issue. Who is the best defender on this team, though?
It was Hopper last year, and it definitely hasn't been this year. I mean, Chris Abrams-Drain has maybe made himself as much money as anybody in the country this year.
Yeah.
He's fourth in the country in interceptions, first or second in pass breakups. At some point, I assume teams are going to quit throwing the ball at him, but they haven't quit yet, Robinson's been really good. Johnny Walker at the other defensive end has been pretty good. But this defense as a whole, until the second quarter last week, had taken a step back from last year. So what we wait to find out is, was the second through the fourth quarter last week more that Missouri figured it out and that defense is back, or was it more that Kentucky only has one way to beat you? And if that way is not working, if Ray Davis isn't working, they've got nothing. Because Devin Leary, I don't think has been good at quarterback, but he has been helped by also having really bad play from his wide receivers. So.
Yeah. It feels like one explanation you hear for the league being down is that the portal has picked off a lot of guys and eaten away at depth a lot of teams. It feels like Missouri is in a pretty good spot there compared to most teams. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think they've done a good job in the portal. And I think they have pretty good depth. They feel good about their team, and then they're going to have to rebuild it for next year because that's the way it works now, right?
Yeah. Biggest concern for them going forward.
I guess in the short term, it's that they think real highly of themselves and believe their press clippings and don't think South Carolina can beat them, and South Carolina does. I mean, because I think it helps Eli Drinkwitz. He has a visual aid for this. Last year, South Carolina was coming off a big win. I can't remember who it was. But they had a nice win, entered the top 25. Missouri went to the other Columbia. It's like they were okay. Nothing, they hadn't done, and they dominated South Carolina, won the game 23-10. So all Drinkwitz has to do is say, look what you guys did to them last year. They can do that to you. So I think probably short term, that's the biggest concern. I don't see any huge holes. I guess I would say they've only got one running back who they've given significant carries, and they've only got two who they've given any carries. Cody Schrader pulled his quad the week before the LSU game. Now, he went out and ran for 114 yards and 3 touchdowns with a pulled quad, so that's pretty good. But if for some reason he can't go, what do they have there? I'm not sure they know. I guess that would be my biggest personnel concern.
Yeah, I thought the way you answer that was interesting. First of all, you had to have a pause to think about it because nothing came to mind. And that's really, I didn't have an answer in mind either when I asked you the question. Now, again, I would say I'm a little concerned. Can Brady Cook continue to play at the level that he's played at? I don't know. Blaine Gilmer, our partner on the site, says this. Biggest concerns, they allowed 6.4 yards per carry against LSU at 5.8 against Kentucky. I think that's fair. Those are two of the league's better rushing teams. I think that LSU was able to flip the momentum on that game by just slowing it down and getting some rushing yards. So that might be the biggest one I can think of too.
Yeah, the defense, we don't know what it is quite yet. And look, I don't think South Carolina can run the ball at all, so it's not a worry there. Florida's running game doesn't scare you. Arkansas's doesn't with Rocket Sanders. At this point, it looks like
Right.
not playing all year. But yeah, there's definitely a concern when you go to Athens, Georgia, and then when Tennessee comes in here, that all they have to do is line up and hand the ball off and run it through you. And if they do that, obviously you're in trouble.
Right. This weekend, South Carolina. Spencer Rattler is a stud when he can get a pass off, but they've been pretty good and active and physical up front. Anything about the matchup in particular that Missouri should be concerned with?
I mean, if the South Carolina offensive line just figures something out, right? I think that's concern. But the other thing is, I mean, South Carolina did score 39 points last week. The one thing I thought going into the Kentucky, the reason I picked Missouri to beat Kentucky was I said, I don't think Kentucky can score with them. I don't think they can win a shootout. South Carolina could, I mean, they don't scare you a ton, but that's a competent SEC team. Shane Beamer didn't forget how to coach. They've got some guys there. So if you get into a game where you're not playing any defense and you're in one of those last guy with the ball wins, I think that concerns you. You want your defense to show that what it did in the second half last week is a little bit more who they are than what they've done some of the previous games.
See, I think stylistically, this is a matchup that Missouri's got a pretty solid edge in. I know on paper it's a 6 or 7 point game. I think that's about what Vegas has got it. But South Carolina hasn't been great away from home. They did play Georgia pretty well for a half, and we know how that ended. But I think you've got – look, not a lot of teams have a lockdown corner. We talked about Abrams Drain earlier in the podcast. You got him. I presume you would put him on Leggett. We talked about rushing the ball. South Carolina is a bottom half of the league, probably bottom third of the league rushing attack. So I think in terms of how these teams match up, strengths on weaknesses, I'd be a little surprised. Well, probably not a little surprised. Probably a lot surprised if Missouri lost this one.
And I think it helps Missouri. It's homecoming. It's going to be wild here. They've got a week off next week. Georgia isn't next week. There's no looking ahead. I mean, what are you looking ahead to, right? And I think this team is, they shouldn't think they're good enough to just walk out and beat anybody in the SEC. I mean, this is not like Missouri's been doing this for 4 and 5 years, so you don't really deserve to get cocky over beating Vandy and winning at Kentucky. I mean, do a little something more before you get too full of yourself. So yeah, I agree. I mean, but we do this. We always look at games like if these teams play 10 times, Missouri probably wins 7 or 8. Yeah. The fact is they only play 10. They only play once. Like all it takes is Missouri to play poorly and South Carolina to play well, and you lose. Like, that's where analytics and win probability and things like that lose me a little bit. Like, you can simulate the game as many times as you want to, but they're only going to play it once, and it's played by human beings, and we'll see what happens.
And we did see them, the Middle Tennessee State game. They had a pretty good lead, made that one closer than they should. There's a little bit of history of them doing that, but there's also a big difference between early September and getting into Halloween territory where we are.
And confidence is a dangerous thing. When kids start to get it, suddenly they don't think they can get beat, and sometimes that's really good. I mean, sometimes they just go out there, and I think Missouri has gone from a team that wasn't sure if things would go well at the end, that expected kind of maybe for somebody else to make the play, to now Missouri kind of expects to make a play at some point.
All right, I'm going to do rapid fire round on some questions here. I know you got to be out in about 10 minutes for Eli Drinkwitz's press conference, so we'll just probably go in order from the start. All right, Kyle wants to know who's been the better hire the last 5 years, Drinkwitz, Gates, or DRF? That's your athletic director. Now look, you before you answer, remember what channel you're on here.
Yeah, I think it's the AD. I mean, she's done a lot of things really, really well. And she didn't hire Drinkwitz, but she did hire Gates. And so if Eli does well and she can keep him, then hey, things are looking up here for the first time in a while. Missouri fans are more excited than they've been in a long time.
Gabe, the correct answer on this channel is always Dennis Gates.
Is Dennis Gates. Okay. Yeah. Well, Blake's not here, so
Blake, that's true.
When he plays hooky, I get to say whatever I want.
Yeah. All right. Nick says we need to convince you to go to Athens.
So here's what that's in reference to. I don't go to road games and haven't for a while. I send my guy.
Right.
So after they won at Kentucky on Sunday morning, I got on and I put in an extra credential request for the game in Athens because I'm not making a decision until after South Carolina, and it's going to be based on what plane fares are. But I said, if they go there 7-1 and they're playing a game where if they win, they're suddenly the East favorite, like I kind of feel like I should be there, right? So I'm torn between the danger of staying home and they win, and we don't have as much coverage as we could, versus the danger of paying for a plane ticket and going and they lose by 4 touchdowns. So it's a tough situation. I'm not sure what to do.
What's a weekend flight from Columbia to Atlanta cost?
Well, not from Columbia. We do not fly from Columbia. That is
okay.
Hundreds and hundreds of dollars. We fly from St. Louis, and that's
okay. Sorry.
That's what I will be investigating
which is
if
what, a 2-hour drive?
Yeah, it's about 2.5 to the airport, and then fly to Atlanta, and then then wait 9 hours for a rental car in the worst airport in America, and then drive to Athens. So
yeah, let's see. Will Morris points out South Carolina hasn't won on the road, beat Furman and Mississippi State at home, but barely beat Mississippi State. Chris says Missouri's win against South Carolina. Definitely going to be a barn burner of a game. Let's see. There was some more questions here. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Does Brady or Luther win the Heisman if Mizzou wins out? No, I think you're just not in a big enough market for that, I guess.
Well, and I don't even think it's that. I mean, look, right now it's Michael Penix. I have a vote, and I would vote for Michael Penix without question. I would vote for Jaden Daniels second. I mean, Brady's not probably going to be the all-SEC quarterback, guys. You can't win the Heisman if there's another guy in your league at your position that's had a better year.
Yeah. Well, and I worry too about Luther Burden just making through the season. He takes a hit every game or two.
Okay, well, and as Tom Hart said on Saturday night, right in the bag of chips, so.
Right. All right, let's look down the stretch. The game with Georgia in a couple of weeks is going to be really interesting for reasons we've talked about a little bit. No Brock Bowers. If Missouri's able to win that game, what's that do for the program?
I mean, it's the biggest win they've had in the SEC if that happens. I don't think there would be much question about that. I won't say it's the biggest in school history. I mean, they beat number 2 Kansas to get to the doorstep of a national title once. So it's not the biggest in school history, but I think if they were to win that game, it sews up SEC Coach of the Year for Eli Drinkwitz. It gives them the inside track to win the East. It doesn't win them the East because Florida and Tennessee would still be part of that conversation, and Missouri still has to play both of them after Georgia, but it's gigantic.
All right, throw Georgia game out in Athens. That's going to be a tough win.
Yeah.
Brock Bowers, no Brock. Look, that's a tough win if it's no Brock Bowers and it's in Columbia. So I think can they win? Crazier things have happened. Do either of us expect them to win? No. But then you look up, you got Tennessee, Florida at home, at Arkansas. Which is the toughest one left of those 3?
Probably Tennessee at home, I would think. I don't think Tennessee's the anti-Josh Heupel team. They can't throw the ball at all, but they run it and play really good defense, right? I think people are sleeping on Arkansas a little bit. I think too. Sam Pittman must have murdered someone at the scheduler's office or something. I mean, they had 4 straight games away from home against good teams. They lost them all lost 3 of them by 1 score. I think they're better than their record, but what's Arkansas going to be playing for at that point, right? Are they going to be 4-7 and their season's over? Are they going to be 5-5 and playing to get to the Gasparilla Bowl and that matters to them? Are they just going to be playing? I mean, look, there is a scenario where Missouri goes into that game, and if you win it, you win the East. If that's the case, Arkansas would love to spoil that. So I would put that actually probably tougher than Florida at home.
All right, yes or no? Does the league get a team in the college football playoff?
Yeah, I think Georgia will get there. I think what Georgia proved last week against Kentucky is they don't care about most of these games. They know they can walk out and put out a C effort and beat most teams in this league. But if you give them a reason to care, if Kirby Smart gets his guys to say, hey, everybody thinks Kentucky's going to beat you and they have a point to prove, they can go prove it. And Missouri's going to have their attention. So I give Missouri like a 10 to 15% chance to go down to Athens and win. And that might be a little bit high. But so I think Georgia wins that game. I think they get through the regular season undefeated. And if you're 12-0 or 12-1 in the SEC, you're almost certainly going to the playoff, especially if you started the season number 1.
Is Alabama still your SEC West winner?
I guess for now, until somebody beats them, right? I mean,
yeah.
If LSU beats them, I guess that not only brings LSU into the picture, it brings Ole Miss into the picture. Like, there's a world in which we're talking Missouri, Ole Miss, and Atlanta, which would be something else. I think LSU is a better team, but somebody got to beat Alabama. They haven't yet.
Yeah, well, and that game's in Tuscaloosa too.
Okay.
Three-way tiebreak with Ole Miss, LSU. I don't know how even likely that is. I'd have to look into that, but I'm getting dizzy just thinking about it. All right, give me a storyline or two in the SEC so far that's really surprised you.
Well, I think it's just that we are halfway through the season, and the idea of 2 SEC teams making the playoff is virtually dead. Yeah. I mean, if Alabama wins out and beats Georgia, it's still possible. I just don't think anybody thinks that's going to happen. And then the other one it doesn't surprise me because it's like a fall tradition, but A&M's headed toward 8-4, and we all want to see what that means,
Yeah, what a weird situation. Here's another thing that I just find crazy, and I think in a good way because it's made it more interesting. I kind of keep a composite of 3 or 4 computers where they've got teams rated above average and just kind of use that in there as a guide for what lines might be. And if you match so-and-so up against so-and-so who would be favored and all that thing. Man, and this is crazy right now. Georgia is the highest rated SEC team by this composite. They're number 7 overall. Alabama's next at 11. But the difference between Alabama at 11 and Ohio State, which incidentally is the top team in this, is 4.5 points. If that's right, that's how much parity we have in college football right now, and I find that fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been begging for years, give me a playoff where I can't pick the 4 teams before the season. Yeah. I hope Washington gets in, right? I hope North Carolina gets in. I would love Missouri or Ole Miss to get in. I mean, give me different teams. I mean, this is, Chris, when's the last year that you would say the SEC is not the best conference in the country? 2005? Back then?
It's been a minute.
I mean, yeah, it's been the best conference in the country for 15 years. I think it's pretty clearly not this year. I think the Pac-12 is pretty obviously the best conference in college football.
Well, and the Big Ten would like a word here. I'm looking at 3 of the top 4: Ohio State 1, right. Michigan 2, Penn State 4. According to, again, it's just a composite of some things.
Big Ten's so weird. It's like the team that the 1, 2, and 3 hitters are hitting like 570, and everybody else in the lineup's at like 112.
Yeah, and here's another thing. If you will go down a little further, LSU's lurking out there at 12, and against Ohio State right now would be about an 8-point underdog on a neutral field. Again, I said this over and over, but I think if you had a 12-team playoff right now, it would be
push that through this year. I mean, in a 12-team playoff, Missouri, Kentucky would have been an elimination game, right? Yeah. Texas A&M, Tennessee would have been an elimination game. Like, these people that say the regular season doesn't matter if you expand the playoff could not be more wrong. It matters for way more teams.
Especially in this environment. All right, Gabe, I know you got to get to practice. Any parting thoughts on the way out, and tell folks where they can find your work?
Yeah, just go to powermizzou.com. I think we still, put up a big banner if you go to our sites and don't subscribe. So go do that. Same price as it was in 2002. So.
Yes, it is. Hey, Gabe, thanks for joining us. I am pretty sure we're going to have you join us for future episodes. Certainly, as Missouri football continues to be relevant and with basketball season on the horizon, something we're very excited about. But thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it, man.
All right, that's Gabe DeArmond of PowerMizzou.com. Quick shout out to our sponsors. We've got CHOMPS. That's my go-to snack for halftime of football games, workouts, whatever. 9 flavors. Try the variety pack. Something for everybody there. 9 to 10 grams of protein per stick. Free of the top 9 allergens. No hidden harmful ingredients. So great for your kids. You can check out the promo code scrolling across the bottom of the screen and get a discount on CHOPS. Help out the people who help out our show. Also, our show presented by myperfectfranchise.net. If you are sick of working for someone else, looking for a better life that you can live more on your terms, the guy that can help you understand the risks and rewards of that is Andy Ludicky of My Perfect Franchise. He will help you find the perfect franchise based on your goals, dreams, skills, and financial requirements. Your personalized American dream. He'll educate you on the process, work with you every step of the way. Call him 404-973-9901. No obligation. His services are free. Fill out a free questionnaire and get started. All right, let's wrap this up. See if there's anything that we didn't get to in the chat, any general topics, things like that. Mike says, cannot overlook any team in the SEC. Absolutely. I mean, even Vanderbilt last week was at a point with the 2-point conversion, would have been within a score of Georgia if that goes. So, yeah, even Vanderbilt right now is capable of bringing it for bits and pieces. So I think the parity in this league is unlike I've ever seen. We said that before the season. Really looked forward to seeing this SEC season because I thought there would be more parity. But I'll tell you, I'd be lying if I said I thought it would be this degree of parity. So I think this is fun football right now. Let's see what else we've got here. Problem is you don't know when KJ Jefferson will be Superman versus missing in action. Chris, I think KJ Jefferson's problem, and look, I've not watched Arkansas probably as much as you have. That offensive line, man. You saw that play he made against Alabama, where he's swatting off defenders. When you can't block, it's hard for a quarterback to have success in this league. Even as good as Spencer Rattler's been, you've seen the mistakes, and that's because South Carolina can't block either. So, I think we underrate offensive line a lot of times, and I think we're underrating it in that case. Big Ten and Pac-12 teams will end up beating up on each other anyway. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we're watching. We've got the Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan triangle, and I believe they all play each other. That's right. Michigan goes to Penn State, and we've got Ohio State hosting Penn State this week. So, yes, that will sort of take care of itself. I mean, I guess what if they all win one of those games and lose one of those games? Then how do you sort that out? Especially if nobody else loses a game to someone else, that's going to be a nightmare to sort through if you're the playoff committee. And the Pac-12, we took a layer of that out this weekend when Oregon beat Washington. And, of course, that was at Washington. Which was I think Washington was a favorite in that game by virtue of being the home team. Southern Cal, I think, pretty much eliminated itself from the playoff chase last weekend by that loss to Notre Dame, which I think was 18 points. Southern Cal's defense was always suspect. Didn't show up in that game. I didn't really see Southern Cal as a legit contender because of the defense. And Notre Dame, I'm not saying Southern Cal couldn't make it. Crazier things have happened. FPI is giving them about a 2% chance to make the playoff, but I just don't think the defense is good enough. And now one semi-lopsided loss on the resume. So, yeah, I guess really it's Washington and Oregon at this point. I mean, Oregon State's got a snowball's chance maybe by winning out, but and Utah, I would have liked to see Utah have helped at the quarterback position because their defense was better than I think people thought. But the offense not as good. And again, a lot of that traces back to the quarterback injury issues going into the season. All right, let's wrap it up here. Charles says loves the Missouri supporters. Yeah, we've had a lot of you guys in the channel. We really appreciate you guys. It's been a lot of fun. Um, we do cover the SEC as a whole, but sometimes we give a day to a particular team that's trending up, and that's kind of what we did with Missouri today. So, all right, we'll be back at it. I think we'll be back at it tomorrow. I'm going to be in Birmingham for SEC basketball media days. I'm not sure what our content schedule is going to look like. I'm considering recording a show ahead of time and running it as a premiere between 11 and whenever we're done with that. So I think we may have something for you on the football side. It won't be live like it is today because I'll be doing basketball down in Birmingham and maybe storing up some content there. But then we'll certainly be back at it live on Thursday and Friday. Friday's usually our Trey Wallace day from Outkick. That's a lot of fun as we go around the SEC. So in any case, thanks to Gabe DeArmond of PowerMizzou.com for being our guest today. If you didn't catch it from the beginning, you can go back and catch that on our channel and watch the whole thing live. Anyway, I'm Chris Lee for the SEC Daily here at Southeastern 14. We appreciate you watching. We'll see you again Wednesday with more Southeastern Conference football content.